Hey guys, this is the Spyderco Stretch Tooling K390. After I bought this knife, I did a first impressions video, and since then I have carried this knife, I would say about 99% of the time. And everything I needed to cut, I tried to cut using this knife. And when I didn't have stuff to cut, I would find stuff to cut. I was very curious about K390, and if you're thinking about getting a knife in K390, then this really might be of interest to you. Now, about the stretch model. There are variations of it, and it does come in a lot of steels, a lot of interesting steels, I would say. This one has the FRN handle scales. I think one of the ZEP 189 models has G10 handle scales, and I'm guessing those must be way more comfortable, although this one's not bad either. Now, I like Spyderco's FRN handles. Why? Because to me, they just say work knife or test knife, which for me is pretty much the same thing. I don't really have work to do with knives, but I like testing them, so I find things to do. Now, I have sharpened this knife a few times. When I got the knife, I put an 18-degree per side edge on it. I worked with it a bit. I did a few cut tests. You can see some cut tests and the conclusions to those cut tests on my Patreon page should you care. After that, I dropped the edge angle to 16 degrees per side, and I used the knife for 1 month with 16 degree per side cutting edge angle. Now, I did just about everything I could. Cut cardboard, plastic, a lot of food, and especially hardwood. And by hardwood, I mean dry acacia like this. I kept this piece because of this knot to demonstrate what I did with it. Back then it had a 16 degree per side edge angle, and purposefully I bit into the knot and twisted, and you can hear that. This is a hard knot. That's what I kept doing with a 16 degree per side edge angle, because I wanted to see if somehow I could manage to chip the edge. Nothing happened, and I could keep this knife sharp simply by stropping it on this strop. It's a homemade strop, white bark river stropping compound. And not every night, but when it stopped shaving or when it had some difficulty cutting paper, I just went to the strop and very, very gently, very calmly, under aim, like I explained in my videos, and strop the knife. And it came back. It came back to shaving sharp. Not perfect shaving sharp, but you wouldn't rip hairs out. You would still cut them. Not maybe like now, when, oh, well, you can maybe, I don't know, see the hairs. But very well. And paper slicing sharp. It had no chips in the blade, no dents. The only thing that was damaged was the tip, and that was actually done by my wife. She hit a porcelain cup. Of course that's going to damage the tip, but I kept it sharp simply by stropping it for 1 month. After 1 month, I reduced the edge angle to what it is right now, about 14 degrees per side. And for the last month, I've been using this. Now, I did pretty much the same things like you've just seen. I tried to find hardwoods, various more difficult materials to cut, and tried to force the blade. You can see how shiny this is. This is really, really hard. Acacia is pretty tough, especially the drier it gets. They make good axe handles out of acacia. And once again, kept it sharp simply by stropping. Now, at present, haven't sharpened this knife on any sort of stones for 1 month. It still slices paper. I can still, even if I cut a lot of cardboard, and I've showed this on the test video I did, like I said, on my Patreon page, you can see me cutting cardboard, it not cutting paper, and then simply stropped it, and it came back to even shaving sharp, I think. This was a nice surprise. Now, I'm all for cut tests, cutting cardboard, cutting various kinds of rope. Those are all good. Um, they will tell you by comparison VG10 versus K390, S30V versus LMAX, how the steels do. But as soon as you cut a different material, the steel may react differently depending on grind thickness, edge angles. I didn't really care about that. Now, I do care about that. I love cut tests. But when it came to this knife, I cared more about being a user. And yes, like I said, when I didn't have anything to cut, I went to the backyard and found some wood pieces, stripped them of bark. Some were dry, some were fairly green. And I just kept whittling wood to see what would happen. Went through knots like your average knife user would do. Somebody who's not testing knives for YouTube, but somebody who's actually using the knife. Anything I need to cut, fruit, vegetables, K390 is a carbon steel. And to be honest, I didn't notice this. A few weeks ago, I looked at the blade besides my Endura. And that's where I noticed that the blade is actually pretty dark. It caught a patina. See, the first week I got it, I stuck it into an orange, I think. And I left it there for 1 hour. Retrieved the knife, and it had almost no patina. Now, this is something that I didn't hear a lot of YouTubers mention. Acidization is not that bad for K390. I used to cut, and I do cut, bell peppers for my dog almost every evening. And after that, I will leave the knife on a counter like this, wet until it dries. And the patina it formed is not as severe as with other carbon steels. If you would do this to, let's say, Mora's 1095, you will get a very strong, very dark patina, which will wear off. As soon as you cut into a piece of wood, you will see streaks of that patina on that piece of wood. Here, I don't think you can see anything. So it doesn't wear off. Now, you can see how it wore off on the edge and right close to the edge because I under aim when I strop. That's where it's a bit shiny. But K390, the patina that it forms, I like it. It's not as dark. It will get that nice mist very quickly, but then when you look in comparison, yeah, it's darker. But it doesn't smell like my 1095, which has the patina. It doesn't wear off. If you're gonna cut an apple in with this knife, personally, I cannot taste that residue. Acidization is not a problem. The problem would be salt water, sweat. And I found this out recently. I went to chop some wood. I had this knife in my pocket and I kept a bandana, which I used to wipe the sweat off my face. I kept it in the same pocket. And it could have been maybe 1 hour when I got back in the house. I saw a few red spots form on the spine and a couple on the side of the blade, which was exposed. And maybe the bandana touched it and it immediately rusted. Now I tried to replicate that. It didn't work. The rust, those red spots came off pretty quickly without any sponge or any washing solutions. I just rubbed it with the bandana and it came off. So personally, I don't have a problem. I didn't oil the knife at all. When it came, it had a glaze of some sort of grease on it. I never oiled it, never put any oil on it. I never disassembled the knife. I did use a small flashlight to look inside to see if the blade was rusted anywhere. Other than a lot of lint, which maybe you can see, I saw no rust spots, no anything. Now, I didn't use the knife without a pocket clip, and in the meantime, I kind of gotten used to having a pocket clip on the knife. I will use the pocket clip to get enough grip when I open the blade. It's just instinctively. If I take the pocket clip off the knife at this point, it'll be more comfortable in hand, but something will be missing. And these F-Rine handle scaled Spydercos are pretty thin, so the grip does provide extra real estate for you to hold, and it seems a bit thicker, and I like it. I tried to put the clip on the tip down gear to give me more thickness here. That didn't work out for me. As for the model in which it came, I really like the stretch. I really like the stretch. I'm happy I got the stretch and not the Endura or the Delica, because it has a few advantages. Now, if you look at the Endura, the handle is narrower, and this is comfortable. This is comfortable, for example, in the chest lever grip if you have to work with it. This is not comfortable in the chest lever grip, at least not for me. One, because it's wider, it has this pronounced curve down here. The butt of the knife, it's curved downwards, and you have the finger choil, and this beak bites into my hand. So in the chest lever grip, it's not going to be comfortable, but in the forward hammer grip, it just feels very safe because it's a bit wider, and the thickness I think is equal to the Endura, but it feels very comfortable. Now, holding it like this, it's very comfortable. Choking up on it, once again, I've learned a lot in testing cutting with these four knives side by side, the Endura, the Cara, and the Manly Peak, along with the Stretch too. Tried various grips for about maybe 1.5 hours. I cut with each knife just because I was bored of cutting wood with the Stretch. And I noticed that, yes, if you choke up on a blade, it is more comfortable. It's more comfortable than, for example, the Cara. Way more comfortable than the Endura, and I figured out why, because the Endura wasn't built for you to choke up on it. It's really a remarkable feat of science that I discovered there. It's just not built for you to choke up on it. I mean, you can do that. You can choke up on it, but it's going to be very, very uncomfortable because of this hump, the way it's built. This one's slightly finer, slightly less pointed outwards. I can't find my words right now. It's late. I'm tired. But the Cara, you can choke up on it very well, and this is one of the difference. Maybe you can see it here. See the shape of the Cara and the shape of the Endura, and the Stretch 2 is kind of in between, but it has excellent comfort in hand. It's very stable with or without gloves. Now, I didn't work on the scales. Like I said, I didn't disassemble the knife, and I think it's just, it fits your hand. I am not the biggest fan of back locks. I prefer Cold Steel's triad locks. I think those are great because they don't move that much in your hand. You pick up a Cold Steel and you'll see this pin, which makes it a triad lock, and all the tension will be taken over by this pin, so it won't move the back lock in your hand when you're doing really strong cuts holding the knife like this in the forward hammer grip. With any back lock, you're going to have this movement. Now, in some cases, there are some Enduras which are built a bit tighter, some Spydercos, and some other backlock knives which are built a bit tighter, have a stronger spring, and you don't feel it as much. And that's also the case of this knife. After cutting wood with these four knives here for about 1.5 hours, maybe 2, the most comfortable was the Manly Peak, followed by the Stretch. And this was actually a pretty big surprise for me. I didn't think that this was going to be so comfortable, but yeah, Manly says it's not a tool on their little paper there, but it's more of a tool than some other knives. They're more able to use it as a tool, as what I use this for. Just a knife to do whatever you need to do with. And the Stretch model is great. The K390 is great, and from what my understanding, from what I've seen other people mention, they treat their K390 blades a bit different. This one has a thinner grind. It's about 1/3 thinner than a regular Endura behind the edge. The edge angle is a bit better than with a standard VG10 Endura, and the spine. This was one thing which I really liked. I don't know if you can see the texture. It's sort of a wavy texture. This is a straight spine with which you could scrape. And I sometimes use that. For example, this one still has a scrapey spine, sort of. I'll put that on knives to strike a ferro rod, to play around with it. But for example, on my Enduro, I put that on and then I round it off the sides because it would bother me sometimes. And I said, why do I need a straight spine anyway? It does come in handy. When you want to scrape something, you can do that with this spine. However, if you want to cut something and you want to help yourself with the thumb from your opposite hand, if you have a very, very sharp spine, it might hurt your finger in a long run. This one's sharp. You can scrape with it, but really, if you use it as a leverage point and you just keep pushing your thumb into it, it's not going to be as uncomfortable as some others. So I didn't modify it. I didn't smoothen it out. I think it's very, very well made. My only problem with this knife is the one I've had, and I mentioned this in the first impressions video, the asymmetrical grind. And for the price you pay, I think this is just a shame. This is just, I mean, come on, how hard is it? Cara, symmetrical grind. I've lowered the edge angle and it still has the same edge width on both sides. Manly Peaks. And they're both, you could buy 2 Manly Peaks for the price of this one. And this one has an asymmetrical grind, and that is just a shame. Now let's get to the good stuff, because there's, like I said, I really like this knife, and there are some design features about this knife which I like. The jimping, for example. I'm not a fan of jimping. I've mentioned this many times. If jimping's there, it really shouldn't bother me, and that's it. I don't use it much for indexing, but choking up on this knife, I didn't find the jimping unpleasant. And because I try to use the knife as an average user will, I'll try certain things. A lot of people like to put their thumbs on the jimping here, and I tried that. And you know what? It's much more pleasant than the jimping on my Enduro. It never bothered me. The spider hole. This is one of the bigger spider holes. It's even bigger than the one on my Pacific Salt, I think. And I didn't even pay any attention to this until I realized that sometimes I'll just disengage the knife like this, and I can't come over with my thumb to grab it by the spine to close it. So I'll just grab it in with my thumb in a hole and pull it. And it feels very comfortable and very safe to grab. Now, of course, being on camera, sometimes I'll grab the spine, but when not, this bigger spider hole is really fantastic. Compare that to the one on my Enduro. This is much better. Unfortunately, I never grab the knife like this, and I hardly ever choke up. I grab it like this for some odd reason, with my finger right here on this beak, and it does bother me a bit, but not enough to say that I will sand it down just now. This is the natural position in which my hand wants to hold this knife, and it is still comfortable. This is, I think, the nice part about the stretch and my hand. I like what they did with it. You see, if you look at the Enduro, for example, you will see this this part of the screws being almost flush, sticking out a bit. Here, it's sunken in. And I think it just looks better and it feels better. The FRN handle scales are truly nothing special. But for me, like I said, they say work knife, test knife. So I have nothing against it. What I wish they would have done is the pocket clip. I'm not talking about a different shape of pocket clip or a deep carry pocket clip. Sometimes a shallow carry pocket clip is okay. I mean, if it's a work knife, you want to be able to grab it without putting your hand inside your pocket, especially if you have dirty hands. However, for some models, and I don't have do I have? Yes, I have the Tenacious Lightweight. They parkerized, I think, the pocket clips, and these wear much nicer. They actually don't wear off, and this is still painted on. I have the impression that it lasts a bit longer than what I have on my old Endura, but still, Parkerized pocket clip would have been better, especially for the price point. Now, the Para 2. The Para 2 also came in a version of K390. Well, not a version of heat treatment of K390. They ran it a bit softer, and a lot of people complained about it. Some people liked it, and yeah, if I could find a Para 2 in K390, I would probably buy it, even if it would be a bit softer. I do like the steel, I have to admit. But in using this, I also was prompted by a fellow YouTuber to tell him my opinions in regards to these two knives, and so I use them side by side. They're very similar in the sense that you can choke up on both of them. They have a very similar blade shape. The handle material is different, and like I said, it's a similar blade shape, but it's not the same. If I were to put the Spyderco Paramilitary in front of the Stretch 2, as you would grab it, you see here, the blade would hang a bit lower in your hand. And believe it or not, when you're cutting wood, this is going to make a huge difference. I tried, and this one's set at 15 degrees per side, this one's set at 14 degrees per side, so the difference is not that big. But it was much easier, even though this handle for me is a bit more comfortable. This one is more stable in hand, but this one's comfortable, as squarish as it is, as boxy as it is. This one just went through much better because it has that extra belly. The Stretch model, I think it's great, and if it wouldn't be as expensive, because I did find a Stretch with the ZDP 189 G10 handle scales, I would probably be very tempted to try those out. The only thing I have, and I mentioned this, is the asymmetrical grind. That really, really bothers me. For the price point, I mean, if this would be a $40 knife and it had an asymmetrical grind, okay. If this would be, I don't know, S30V and a $70 knife or $80 knife and it had a slightly asymmetrical grind, okay. But this being a €140 knife with an asymmetrical grind, Now, I never took the knife apart, but at some point I did have to retighten the screws, all of them. The pivot screw was the least of the problems, but the body screws, did have to retighten them all. Just from use, they loosened. Not exactly sure how that works. For my Endura, the pivot screw always loosens up. I don't like to put Loctite when I can not put Loctite in. But that's what happened. No real complaints except for the asymmetrical grind, and for the price point, well, didn't feel the need to disassemble the knife. I didn't really maintain it very much. The lint, I just blew out of there, didn't wash it, didn't dry it. Just the most I did was wipe it on my shirt or on my pants and put it in my pocket. Even after I cut some fruit, I would just make sure it's medium dry before I put it in my pocket. And this is the patina it got, which I find actually looks pretty cool. So yeah, K390, definitely a good user steel, because I think if you're going to be just a knife user, you will care more about being able to maintain your knife sharp in the easiest of ways. And I think in these 2 months, I cut more stuff, found more stuff to cut than the average user would cut in a year. And I kept stropping the knife. And when I did use stones to reshape the edge, I did it because I wanted to reduce the edge angle, not because I had to, because the steel was somehow fatigued. No chips in the blade, everything was just fine. So yeah, this was my review of the Spyderco Stretch 2 and K390. If you guys have any questions, comments, suggestions, or if you think that I just got it wrong, please let me know in the comment section. I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd like to thank you for watching. Go check out my Patreon page. And as always, have a great day.